Hello and welcome to this Explorer gameplay video on the official MTG Arena channel. Today we're taking a look at mono-white humans updated with the latest Explorer Anthology expansion, which introduced a couple new tools to the archetype, including Mutavault in our mana base, a very efficient creature land, only costs 1 mana to activate it, and turn it into a 2/2 creature with all creature types until end of turn, so it also counts as a human for some of our human synergies, such as maybe activating Mutavault before playing Athalia's Lieutenant, so all other humans we control get a +1/+1 counter, including Mutavault, and then whenever another human enters, the Lieutenant itself also picks up a +1/+1 counter. And then the other new addition is a Brave the Elements, a 1 mana instant, says we get to choose a color, and then white creatures we control gain protection from the chosen color until end of turn. If you need a refresher on what protection does, I like to use the mnemonic device DEBT, D-E-B-T. The D stands for the creature cannot be damaged by anything of the chosen color, E means it cannot be enchanted or equipped, B means it cannot be blocked by any creatures of the chosen color, and T means it cannot be targeted by anything of that color. So the mode we're going to use most often is that the creature cannot be blocked by anything of the chosen color. So if we're playing against an opposing creature deck and the opponent's monocolored, then giving all our creatures protection from that color means our team becomes unblockable and we can often attack for the win. But Brave the Elements can also be used to maybe save a creature from a removal spell by playing it in response. Can also use it to maybe set up some blocks and then give the team protection to maybe get some favorable trades. So Brave the Elements is incredibly flexible and only costs a single white, so very easy to keep available. And then we've got a bunch of 1 mana creatures to make sure we can curve out nicely, including a Dauntless Bodyguard, can maybe give one of our creatures indestructible if we sacrifice it, if we played the Bodyguard afterwards, although if we played on turn 1 it's still just a nice 2/1 human that can apply a bit of pressure. We've got the Hopeful Initiate, which can pick up +1 counters over time thanks to the training mechanic if it attacks alongside a larger creature, and then we can also remove +1 counters to maybe take out an artifact or enchantment. And then the Recruitment Officer, a new card from the Brothers War, is a great mana sink in this deck. For 4 mana, we get to take a look at the top 4 cards of our library, reveal a creature with mana value 3 or less from among them, and put it into our hand. And as you can see, all the creatures in this deck fit that description, so this can provide a nice bit of card advantage. It can also be nice if we have something like a Brutal Cathar in play, and we want to let it switch to nighttime, so we can't cast anything to make that happen, and then we can instead just activate our Officer to still get a bit of card advantage. Then at 2 mana, we've got our Lieutenant, which is one of our better cards in the deck. We've got 4 copies of Thalia, which can make non-creature spells cost 1 more, and the only non-creature spell in our deck is Brave the Elements, which is still very affordable at just 2 mana, and then can be very effective against opposing strategies relying on a lot of non-creature spells. And then Luminarch Aspirant can put a +1/+1 counter on one of our creatures each turn. And then at 3 mana, we've got Brutal Cathar as our main removal spell, can exile a creature when it enters, and if it switches between day and night, we can maybe exile multiple creatures with it. Not too difficult to cast 2 spells in the same turn in this deck to let it switch back to daytime after it's been night, especially if we activated Officer to maybe find an extra human. And then 2 copies of Extraction Specialist, which can get back a 1 or 2 drop from our graveyard and put it straight onto the battlefield, although it won't be able to attack or block for as long as we control the Specialist. Still very nice alongside Athalia's Lieutenant, for instance, which will put +1 counters on the entire team once again. Can maybe get back a Thalia if we need that taxation effect, or get back an Aspirant, which is still useful even if it doesn't attack or block, and even something like an Officer or Bodyguard can still offer some utility if they're not attacking or blocking. And finally, 4 copies of Adeline, which is the sledgehammer of the deck, can deal a massive amount of damage very quickly by spawning additional 1/1 humans whenever a creature attacks. Great synergy with the Athalia's Lieutenant, as those extra human tokens will also put extra +1 counters on the Lieutenant itself, and if we already have a bit of board presence thanks to those human tokens sticking around, the Lieutenant will also pump them up. And then our mana base, besides Mutavault, includes a few more utility lines. 1 Shafet Dunes can be sacrificed to give the team +1/+1 until end of turn. The downside is that it costs 1 life to generate white mana with it. And then we've got Aiganjo, which can be channeled to maybe deal 4 damage to an attacking or blocking creature. And we do have a few legendaries between Thalia and Adeline to also give it an extra discount. And then Castle Ardenvale can generate additional 1/1 human tokens, so that can be useful against more controlling strategies if the game drags out. And then 14 basic planes. So that's our deck. Now let's jump in some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play. Missing a 1-drop, unfortunately, but I think we still keep this. And then turn 2 we can play Aspirants. Turn 3 maybe Lieutenants. And we're up against White's green, presumably Angel Life Gain deck. So Thalia's not going to be at its best, even though our opponent is playing Collected Company. So I'll play Aspirant first. Valkyrie on 2. A land is good. So probably play a Lieutenant here. And then counter on Aspirant itself. Hit for 4. Would love to draw Brutal Cathar to maybe exile a key Angel at 3 mana. Another land would also be helpful, then we can play Thalia and a second Lieutenant to keep up the pressure. If Speaker attacks, we could block and then Brave the Elements, although Brave could be a nice finisher. So our opponent hangs back. And yeah, we can double spell now. Thalia into Lieutenant. So we're applying a nice bit of pressure. Not sure what the opponent's holding here. Company's 4 mana. Maybe they've got Eiganjo to deal 4 damage if we attack. In which case we can make sure Aspirant's large enough to survive. Could make 2 5/5s, and then if they want to block and use Eiganjo, that's fine by me. And then now they're unable to cast a Collected Company on curve, which is the best way they have of getting back in the game. And if we did trade, then Specialist is ready to get our creatures back from the graveyard, especially nice with Lieutenant. And then now Brave the Elements on white should be lethal. And our opponent explodes. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Our hand's a little heavy on the lands here, but at least we have Officer and Mutavault as mana sinks. If our opponent has removal, Specialist can get one of our cheaper creatures back. So we'll try it. And then turn 2, I might go for Mutavault plus Thalia, so turn 3 we can already activate it if we don't want to play Specialist. Opponent red-black, so the Rakdos midrange deck is a tough matchup for most creature strategies, although Specialist is one of our better tools in the matchup. Turn 2 Harvester. Lieutenant was nice, so now we can double spell Initiate and Lieutenants. And if our opponent trades for Officer here, we can still get it back with Specialist, so I think we're happy to attack still. Opponent takes it. So they've got other plans for Harvester. Probably wants to kill Thalia here. So they can play a Reflection of Kiki-Jiki on curve, perhaps. Or a bunch of removal spells, Stomp on Officer. And a Fatal Push on Initiate. Yeah, that was an efficient turn. Luckily we still have our Extraction Specialist. Don't have a Lieutenant to get back. Could go for Thalia. Or I could just animate Mutavault and play another Lieutenant, which I also kind of like. Mutavault is a human, so picks up an extra counter, hit for 6. And then if they were to kill a Lieutenant, getting it back with a Specialist is pretty good value. If our opponent plays a Shieldred and we top deck something like a Brave the Elements, we can attack for lethal. And I guess even without Brave the Elements we would have 4 damage going through. So our opponent goes for a Trespasser instead. Up to 5 again. And they could still have a Fatal Push in hand, or maybe looking at that blood token. Okay, so I think play Specialist now, get back Thalia, make sure there's no Fatal Push, grow the Lieutenants, and then Initiate grows them even more. And yeah, our opponent explodes. Too much value, too much pressure early on. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, and our hand is not ideal. Double Thalia, and then no 1-drop, although with Castle we wouldn't be able to play it on turn 1 anyways. So I think overall it's still probably a keep. And then try and put these Lieutenants to good use. Maybe Brave the Elements as our finisher, and hope that the taxation from Thalia buys us some time. Well, let's see what we're up against. Turn 1 forest into Llanowar Elves. So probably a green devotion strategy. At least Thalia slows down some of their planeswalkers and other non-creature spells. But never love seeing a turn 1 Llanowar Elves. So ideally draw an untapped land so we can play Officer and Lieutenant. Okay, Pelt Collector points towards a green Stompy deck instead, which is also a tough matchup for a creature deck like ours, since green Stompy can usually go bigger a little bit faster, although Brave the Elements could be a nice way to kind of break the board stall to attack for lethal. For now we'll play Lieutenant, grow Thalia, so it can block profitably. I don't think we're attacking. And then we really want to hit some land drops so we can empty our hand quickly and maybe set up 2 attacks with Brave the Elements with protection from green. Aronas, also a good one. It's going to be very difficult to attack past. Adlin, nice draw if we can cast it. For now, just play another Lieutenant, I guess. And then, still no attacks. If I attacked with Thalia, our opponent could double block with the 3/3s and trade, and we really need to preserve our board to leverage Brave the Elements, despite having another Thalia in hand. Don't think we'll have time to deploy it. So if we do eventually deploy Adlin, and we want to set up Brave the Elements, we want to attack first, get our extra 1/1 token, and then Brave the Elements on green. And the Great Henge is bad news, since our opponent can now start gaining more life. Adlin also nice combo with Lieutenant. Okay, so don't think we're attacking this turn. Although if we do attack, we grow both Lieutenants by getting an extra token, so that is tempting. So what happens if we send Thalia, then opponent could double block, we trade for Pack Leader. If we send both, then they have one decent block or double block. I guess sending Thalia is not the end of the world. They may not even trade here. And I really want to get these extra +1 counters. Opponent will double block. So take out Pack Leader. Now we got to keep our 1/1 token. So yeah. Let's see if we can maybe set up lethal over the course of 2 turns without taking a lethal on the way back. Now we can Brave the Elements for 1 mana, which has its advantages. Yorvo enables Runos. And Pelt Collector also grows. They can also activate Runos' ability to pump Pelt Collector even further. Our main concern is some cheap removal from the opponent, taking out Adlin. So can block Pelt Collector without losing one of my creatures. So I'll take it. Okay, land is still useful. So I want to try and play some humans before attacking to grow Lieutenant. Ideally keep at least a blocker back, so we're not necessarily losing to an attack back. Thalia does mean it's a little trickier to play Brave the Elements, so maybe I just play Officer, then attack with Brave, and then play Thalia second main. So I'll go full control just to make sure this works. Move to combat, get our extra Adlin token, and then Brave the Elements. Brave the Elements does not protect Mutavault, it only applies to white creatures. So we're not sending in Mutavault here. So Brave the Elements name green. Okay, so our opponent can block. Takes a bunch of damage. Not quite lethal, but that's okay. And then now we'll play Thalia. Opponent has a company response, that's concerning. Finds Troll plus Pack Leader. So hopefully we still have enough here to survive. Three blockers. And we only need to deal 3 more damage, so even if we lose Adeline here, it's not a disaster. I guess our opponent gains 2 of Henge, so we need at least 5 damage. But Lieutenant going unblocked will be enough. So yeah, we're blocking pretty aggressively here. Also can't forget about the Werewolf gaining Trample, although they also have Ronas to make their creatures gain Trample. So, 2-1 on Ronas, that one cannot target itself at least. And then Adeline on Yorvo, which would be a trade. And then Thalia can block Pack Leader, which doesn't trample inherently. And that's the best we can do, I think. So your opponent can activate Ronas twice. Trample Pack Leader, trample Yorvo. And our opponent still has us, so yeah, that end of turn collected company made the difference. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Our hand's pretty awkward with no 2-mana creatures and double Brave the Elements. So I'm afraid this is a mulligan. This is better. And then probably get rid of Bodyguard, curve Officer into either Aspirant or Thalia, keep 1 Brave the Elements as maybe a board stall breaker. Up against the green deck. So, don't think I need to play Thalia if they're on Green Devotion. I guess they could have a turn 2 Wolfwillow Haven, which is still a reason to play Thalia now. Alright, fine. They've got a Paradise Druid instead, sometimes a 1 or 2 off in the Devotion decks. Found Aspirant, so that's nice. And I think we put counter on Thalia, since our opponent may already want to trade for Officer anyways, so we don't need to put more counters onto it. Okay, so we're getting somewhat close to a lethal board with Brave the Elements, giving protection from green. Thalia doing a good job of making Planeswalkers more expensive, so I'm not hating our chances. Mono Green Devotion not really known for playing a lot of creature removal. So Kiora untaps Paradise Druids, plays a Llanowar Elves, which can maybe chum block. And we can play Bodyguard, so we don't have 13 damage on the board. But next turn we should be able to amass a lethal attack. And then I can protect my Officer maybe, put counter on Aspirants. All going face, just want to get a little bit of damage in, so Brave the Elements can finish the job next turn. Opponent takes it, falls to 4. And don't really see how the opponent gets out of this. Sky Servant's not bad, I guess. Can kill Thalia, but Brave the Elements will still be lethal next turn. And Brave the Elements cannot protect from a colorless source.
Let's get moving.
And yeah, opponent's still dead even without Brave the Elements here. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a decent hand. Just a good 1-2-3 curve, Brave the Elements for protection. And we're facing Yorion, which I should have noticed, so opponent's probably a more controlling strategy. Maybe an Enigmatic Incarnation, Fires of Invention, Enchantment deck. And yeah, the Triome does point in that direction. So, Brave the Elements mostly going to be used to protect from removal. For now we just want to apply as much pressure as possible. And don't expect Brutal Cathar to be especially important either. So our hand could be better. A card like Adeline, a card like Thalia's Lieutenant, and Thalia herself also very effective in the matchup. So in hindsight I might have had to mulligan this hand. Companion, I guess we can exile with Cathar. Although double initiate may be better. And then we get to keep up Brave the Elements. And then the Initiate's also useful in the matchup, since our opponent's playing quite a few enchantments that we can maybe take out if we remove 2 +1 counters. So we got our opponent down to 12. Another tap land. So next turn we're pretty likely to see Fires of Invention or Enigmatic Incarnation. They could also have an Omen here to flash in either the blue one to scry and draw, or the red one to deal 2 damage. Another Aspirant we're happy to play. And then we get 2 +1 counters here. Leyline Binding also makes sense. So we can Brave the Elements here with protection from white, although we will miss out on the +1 counters from Aspirant, because our creatures all have protection from white, so we don't have any illegal targets, but I think it's still worth it here to save a creature. Opponent falls to 3. And then next turn we can Brutal Cathar to clear a path. There's the Fires. And what's next? Fable of the Mirror-Breaker. That's not gonna save them here. So, play Brutal Cathar. Exile a creature, but just an all-out attack would have done it too. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, and we've got a Keeper. Officer into Aspirant into Adlin. Nice aggressive curve. And hope to top deck Lieutenants, or depending on the matchup, Brutal Cathar for removal. Looks like we're up against Mono Blue Spirits. So a card like Thalia, and there it is, would be very good too. Although resolving it turn 2 is going to be tricky, since they can already keep up some counter spells. Alright, opponent taps out for Phantom, so we get to resolve Thalia. Could also go for Aspirant, so Officer can attack past Supreme Phantom. Although having a Thalia in play makes the opponent's hand a lot more awkward to deploy. So even though we miss out on an attack here, I think it's worth it. Now we could still lose to our opponent having a draw of all spirits, especially if they have another Supreme Phantom, and not as many counter spells. We'll see how this plays out. Next turn we can double spell, and likely resolve at least 1 creature. And if they tap out, we can get Adlin going. Alright, opponent does just run out a bunch of spirits, and Ascendant Spirit's a pretty nice mana sink for them. Already down to 12, but now we do have some reasonable attacks at least. So Adlin doesn't really get to keep the extra 1/1 that it generates, unless the opponent wants to double block Thalia to take it out. But at this point, we're probably okay with the opponent killing Thalia, since we resolved our most expensive spells, and it's going to be pretty easy to deploy the rest of our hand. Eiganjo is also an interesting tool we could keep available. Yeah, let's go with Adlin, and then attack all out. If our opponent double blocks Thalia to take it out, we get to keep our 1/1. They're just gonna block the token. And trade for Officer. Opponent reconsiders. It's gonna keep the Ascendant Spirit alive. Nope. Reconsiders again. So no trade. Keeps their flyers available. Another Mausoleum Wanderer. And Spectral Sailor. Yeah, that's a lot of damage in the air. So it takes 7 down to 5. And Brave the Elements is probably not going to be good enough here on blue. Opponent has just too many flyers out there. And even if we Aspirant, put an extra counter somewhere. So Adlin grows up to 4 power. 4, 6, 8, 9 from the token. That's still not quite enough. So does keeping up Eiganjo to kill Supreme Phantom make a difference? Yeah, I guess that's the alternative here. And we have 2 legendary creatures in play, so we can sort of disguise it if we keep Thalia and Adlin alive. So maybe play Aspirants. Counter on Adlin. And attack all out. Opponent takes it. And we'll see if Surprise Eye Gunja is enough. Rattle Chains probably protects Supreme Phantom. Nope, protects Mausoleum Wanderer. One mana Eye Gunjo, kill Phantom. And we still take lethal, so yeah, if it weren't for Rattle Chains bumping the Wanderers, this actually could have saved the day. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, and our hand could really use a couple extra lands. Although we can play double Initiate to start out. Problem is, we don't even have a creature to really train them. So there are gonna be 1/2s that we pump with Lieutenant, and that's about it. I think we can do better. This seems better. Bottom up Brave the Elements, and then Bodyguard into Aspirants. And then Specialist can maybe get something back. Opponent with turn 1 Forests, no play. So it could be another Devotion deck, in which case we're happy to have Brave the Elements as a finisher. Burning Tree Emissary, alright. Version with Emissary. Still counts as a green creature for Brave the Element purposes. Scavenging Ooze could also nerf for Specialist. So, don't actually hate Aspirant counter on itself attack with both. And then if they double block, I can Brave the Elements to keep both my creatures. If they just trade for Aspirant, we get it back with Specialist. Before the Ooze can exile anything. So we see the trade we expected. And then Aspirant's still great, even if it cannot attack or block, just putting a counter somewhere. Ooze does have Burning Tree to exile, so it can grow up to a 3/3. But at least they lost a bit of devotion in the process. So what's the move here? Don't really want to waste my Brave the Elements just yet. Just to save one of my creatures if they block with Ooze. So maybe I play Officer, put counter on Officer, attack with what I have in play and just accept the trade. And not waste an extra counter on a creature that's gonna die. Opponent takes 6. So now we're getting them within range of a lethal Brave the Elements. Ooze gains 1 up to 9. But we have 9 power that can attack next turn. Burning Tree doesn't quite change that. And a Questing Beast, alright. So Questing Beast says damage cannot be prevented, but Brave the Elements says our creatures cannot be blocked, so that doesn't really make a difference. Could potentially make a difference in terms of damage prevention, but that's not going to be relevant here. And Adelin's another nice top deck, so now play Adelin, move to combat attack, and then Brave the Elements, so the extra 1/1's also unblockable. Gonna go full control, just to make sure we get the timing right. And there we go, opponent has no blocks, and takes lethal. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, hand seems decent. Bodyguard into probably a turn 2 Thalia, and then Lieutenant will be a nice way to pump the team. Great synergy with Adelin as well. Let's see what we're facing. Turn 1 Swamp, okay. So not exactly sure what our opponent's up to. Could be red-black mid-range. And that seems to be the case. Turn 2 Harvester can take out Thalia. Although we can get Adeline going in the meantime. I think that beats double spelling Lieutenant and Bodyguard, because Bodyguard does not save from Harvesters -2/-2. Opponent can eat to 1/1 if they want to take out Thalia. Not blocking the 1/1 seems like a mistake. I guess their opponent's username is I don't block, so the story checks out. They can maybe take out Adeline with Harvester and another burn spell. Heartless Act on Thalia instead. Okay, that's fine. Bodyguard wasn't protecting anyone. So we get to untap, and we have a couple options here in terms of sequencing. We could animate Mutavaults to attack with, play a Lieutenant to put an extra counter on it, although it's still going to be a 3/3 that trades for Harvester. So instead, what I don't hate is just animate the 2 Mutavaults, and then we want to make sure to use Mutavault itself to animate it, using its own mana. And then either animate Mutavault or play Bodyguard. I guess Bodyguard protect Adeline might still be better. And then play Lieutenant, pump the team, including Mutavault. And smash. Important to float the mana with Mutavault before activating it, because otherwise it's going to be a Summoning State creature that cannot tap for mana anymore, so you want to avoid that scenario. But yeah, our opponent stayed true to their name, did not block, and took lethal. So yeah, red-black mid-range can be winnable if you're especially on the play with a nice aggressive start, and Thalia on turn 2 is one of our better starts at slowing down those cheap removal spells. So overall, mono-white humans, pretty well-positioned deck in the Explorer metagame, having Brave the Elements to break board stalls against other monocolor decks, thinking of the new mono-green Devotion deck that got popularized thanks to Nykthos being in the Explorer Anthology expansion is a big deal, and then you've got other monocolor decks like mono-blue Spirits, mono-red Aggro, where Brave the Elements can catch the opponent off guard, and it's also great in the mirror match should you encounter those as well. So yeah, that'll do it for today's gameplay. Wanna thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.